Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We have a large group joining in, and we want to thank everyone for their interest in today's discussion. My name is Doug Trout, and I'm the Managing Director of the Nonprofit Search Practice at DRiWaterstone Human Capital. It's my pleasure to moderate today's webinar, How Nonprofits, Foundations, and Social Impact Organizations Can Compete for Top Talent in Today's Job Market. Before I ask the panelists to introduce themselves, let me share a brief word about today's format and DRiWaterstone. We are experts in human capital management for the nonprofit and social impact enterprise sectors. Based in Washington, D.C., with offices in St. Louis and Newport Beach, California, our executive search firm has a 20-year record of helping purpose and mission-driven organizations build high-performance teams and cultures. We work with clients to ensure they have the right leaders in place, leaders who align to their purpose, and who can help achieve their growth, culture, performance, and impact goals. We also offer a range of programs and tools that focus on the behaviors and practices proven to make the biggest difference to leadership, governance, team, and organizational success. At DRiWaterstone, we've built one of the largest networks in the country of purpose and mission-driven leaders, qualified for nonprofit and social impact organizations, and we work with a diverse group of clients across the charitable, institutional, foundation, higher education, social impact enterprise, and corporate citizenship space, locally, nationally, and globally. I invite you to visit DRiWaterstoneHC.com to learn more or to connect with any member of our team. These past few years have been a roller coaster, as we all know, when it comes to recruitment and retention. COVID-19 and the Great Resignation, or as some of us call it, the Great Dip Your Toe in the Water, both had an impact on employment trends across all industries, but particularly the nonprofit and social impact sectors. Are we in a candidate or employee-driven market today? We're going to talk about that. As we've been telling clients for years, regardless of how many people are seeking new jobs and opportunities, the top 10% is still the top 10%. And 100% of our clients want leadership talent in the top 10%. We already know that organizations need to do everything they can to distinguish themselves as a place where high-performance leaders want to be, but is that actually happening? For the more than 1.5 million nonprofits, foundations, and social impact organizations across the U.S., purpose, culture, and impact tends to lead the way when defining their competitive advantage. But is it? We have some great panelists here who are going to help answer that. And we want to hear from you about what you're seeing and what additional questions you might have. To dive into these and other questions, I'm excited to be joined by an exceptional group of leaders. There will be time at the end of our discussion today for you to ask questions. If you have questions, please use the Q&A function and not the chat function at the bottom of your screen. First, let me introduce Seto Akinjiola. Seto is the Chief People and Culture Officer for the Union of Concerned Scientists. She is responsible for all aspects of human capital strategy and operations, including equity and inclusion, talent development, employee relations, culture building, innovation, and alignment with the mission and direction of UCS. Second, Susybelle Gosslee is the Episcopal Health Foundation's Chief Administrative Officer. She's responsible for all business and administrative functions of the foundation, including operations, human resources, human capital, information technology, process improvement, and facilities management. Susybelle offers EHF's internal finance function, oversees the internal finance function, and interfaces with the Episcopal Diocese of Texas, which provides accounting, finance, and payroll benefits processing support to EHF. And finally, my colleague and friend, Julio Suárez, who joined the DRiWaterstone team last year as Managing Director for the social impact sector and has an extensive background in the foundation and social impact space. Prior to joining DRiWaterstone, he served as Head of Community Affairs and Foundation at Anheuser-Busch, where he directed the company's community impact programs across the United States. He's also the Director of Community Affairs and Diversity Outreach at Darden Restaurants, where he administered the Darden Restaurants Foundation, led all national social impact programs, and oversaw the establishment of all external diversity partnerships. I want to thank and welcome our panelists. To get us started, I'm going to ask each of you to take 2 to maybe 3 minutes to talk about your organization, your organizational culture, and how you're appealing to high-performance leaders in the nonprofit sector. Seto, maybe we can kick things off with you.
Sure. Thanks, Doug, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and really looking forward to an engaging conversation ahead. Just a bit about UCS. UCS's mission, which is the Union of Concerned Scientists, mission is for a peaceful, healthy, and just world where science, emphasis on science, helps to serve people and the planet by helping to solve the world's most pressing problems. UCS puts rigorous, independent science into action and developing solutions and advocating for a healthy, safe, and just future. So in a nutshell, we are a science-based advocacy organization looking at issues specifically right now on climate change. Post-pandemic, like many other organizations, our culture is evolving and has been on this journey a little prior to the pandemic, I would say at least 2 or 3 years before, and looking at ways in terms of how we can be more inclusive and transparent in the way that we work and how information gets disseminated across the organization in a way that fosters motivation and then impacts productivity. And we're seeing that that's an increased question that we get from some of our talent, especially high-performing leaders in the talent space or that we're recruiting for when they ask questions about culture. That's one of the top questions that we get across the board, not just from leaders, but from staff as well. So what we've done, even in the way that we've structured the people and culture team and other programs within the organization, is to really take a deep dive into efficiency. And we'll talk a little bit about remote work later, but how we're implementing various systems to help us do our work better and being really intentional about being a people-focused, progressive, innovative, and inclusive organization. So our people and culture team is structured to sort of meet the changing landscape of recruitment, not just recruiting, but not just attracting, but retention as well, which includes people operations, talent acquisition, huge emphasis once again on culture and engagement. And high-performing candidates, high-performing leaders need to see from the beginning how their contributions are going to be valued. We also try to look at ways to get through the recruitment process quickly because competition is fierce for top talent. So we're looking at ways, once again, to be efficient when it comes to recruitment. And the other key piece is around compensation. So being proactive around compensation, even before the process starts, making sure that our wages and benefits are in line with the market, ensuring that we are sharing that information in advance so that expectations are clear from the outset. So really just being more nimble in general in terms of how we communicate, how we show impact from an individual basis, and also around compensation.
Awesome. I suspect this is going to be a theme. I noted, Seto, that you talked about a lot of this starting at the recruitment or even before the recruitment process. Exactly. I think you'll hear more about this today. Susybelle.
Yes. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Julio, for having me here today. It's a pleasure, and welcome everyone. As Doug told you, I'm the Chief Administrative Officer at the Episcopal Health Foundation. We started on paper in 2013 with the sale of a hospital system. The Episcopal Diocese of Texas sold the hospital to the Catholics, and in that there was a $1.2 billion transaction. So we started with a pot of money and started building the organization. 10 years later, we now are in our third strategic plan. EHF is what we go by. We believe that all Texans deserve to live a healthy life, especially the poor and those with the least resources. We're changing the conversation on health. And we're reshaping the debate around healthcare to focus on addressing the non-medical root causes of poor health. And we know that health is much more than seeing a doctor. Access to affordable medical care is only 20% of what contributes to a person's overall health, and the remaining 80% is determined by social and economic status, health behaviors, community safety, physical environment, and much more. We have a budget this year of $54.5 million. We invest in our communities, which are 80 counties in the state of Texas that go down from Beaumont to East Texas and all the way up to Wichita Falls, down to Waco and Austin. And we serve in the capacity of, we provide research. We have around a $4 million budget where we do research in the health space. We grant $37 to $44 million a year. And then we have the benefit of 160 plus Episcopal churches in the 80 counties that help us do community service and community outreach to affect health outcomes in our communities. And that is what we do. I spend more time thinking about retention than I do more on recruitment. Retention, and once you get really high functioning folks in your organization, it's about helping them to learn and grow. We're a learning organization. We spend 36 plus hours a year in our organization to teach people, help them to grow about what's happening in the health space. And it's our way of retaining the great talent that we have. And we also pride ourselves on being innovative and help people along so that they're learning and growing all along the way. We hope that the work that we do speaks for itself and that people in the public health space are enticed to come and be with us based on the good work we're doing.
Awesome. There's so much to dig into there, Susybelle, and I know we're going to, but I mean, the idea about tracking all of that, managing that, who's involved in the learning processes, where is it focused? And I know a lot of the folks on this call have got plans like that also within their own structures, but hearing how we do it differently is so important and so helpful for all of us. So definitely hope we can come back to that too. Julio.
Well, so I can speak to it both from what we do at DRiWaterstone Human Capital. I joined the organization late last year in many ways because I was attracted to the mission and the work that we do here at DRiWaterstone. I came from the intersection of business and really corporate world and philanthropy, right? All very exciting, and it was a very rewarding career. But the opportunity to join a firm like DRiWaterstone that works with so many purpose and mission-driven organizations, like the examples that we have here, but literally from coast to coast, and to be able to leverage that experience that I gained over the last 15, 20 years to help our clients there, and to be able to still make a difference, right? And to contribute to the well-being of these organizations was really empowering to me. And so I think we use that ability, or the message of our ability to impact so many organizations and to have a positive impact in accessing and retaining the talent that these organizations need to deliver on their missions was really empowering to me. And I know that we do that as we recruit for members of our team. As when we work with clients, it's also about helping to, just understanding that they need to have a compelling offer, right? In terms of whether the compensation and what have you, but it's not just that, right? These are purpose and mission-driven organizations. And the key differentiator here is to synthesize and really articulate clearly, what is that impact that you're driving, right? And the stats are good, but man, the human examples, the personalized examples really go a long way. So I think when we are talking to clients, and when I'm talking to candidates, frankly, it's not only to talk about here's what the professional opportunity that comes along with this role and the benefits that come with this role, but here's the mission and the impact that this organization has, and what your role in driving the impact in delivering that impact will play in that organization. So I think it's that obviously you still have to have a competitive offer, but really dive into the impact that the organization has. And that's what we try to work with our clients when we're trying to recruit top level candidates, right? Because they still need top level candidates, but they also, it's not just purpose and mission driven organizations, it's helping find experienced, talented, purpose and mission driven leaders.
Great. Let's get into a little bit more detail now and talk about differentiation. Seto, when you look at the Union of Concerned Scientists, how are you all differentiating yourselves as an employer of choice? And you and I have been working together this summer.
Right.
So how do you differentiate yourself as this employer of choice in a really competitive market? And if you don't want to focus as much on differentiation, how critical does your mission and purpose become in recruiting leaders to the organization?
Right. Well, I'm in the lucky space that both matter. There's equal weight to just who we are as an organization in terms of our mission and purpose, and also the fact that the organization has made an investment in people in general, just, new and existing staff. So starting with the mission piece of that, we have a built-in value proposition for being a science-based advocacy organization. So we really are in a unique space, and where we have candidates who are interested and have tracked, UCS's history over a long period of time and have looked for ways and opportunities to either work here or engage with us in other spaces. And that makes us very attractive to top talent, especially in the environmental space, and then looking at areas like environmental justice. So how do we take it up a notch in terms of differentiation? Well, like I said earlier, we're over the past 5 years, the organization has been on a journey to clearly articulate our values and how they show up both internally in the way we work and externally with our partners and the different stakeholders all throughout the organization. So that includes things like justice and equity, not only branding. Part of our employer branding is our values, and they're up on our webpage, but also looking at how those values are live within the organization, our values and action. So justice and equity for all people of all races, both internally and externally, having the courage to take principled science-based stances, action-oriented, being inspiring and mobilizing people, both within the organization and our membership base, which includes thousands of people. I don't have an exact number there, but individuals that are engaged with the organization in different spaces externally to help build a healthier, safer, and more just world. And to Julio's point, once again, highlighting our impact, which is to develop science-informed policies and practices that create a more livable future. We've also made some changes in the way that we work, which includes recently fully committing to becoming a remote-first workplace to help expand our talent pool. Right now, UCS has hubs and head offices in Washington, D.C., Cambridge, Massachusetts, Oakland, California, and we have a small working space in Chicago. So a lot of our talent pool was centered around those 4 cities, and moving to a remote first workplace has allowed us to expand and also meet our diversity and inclusion goals. So once again, we sort of shifted our culture to be more people focused, where we've also once again invested in things like wages and benefits that are on par with like organizations, because as I said earlier, competition is fierce. So it's not just about wages and impact. Not wages and benefits, but also impact and making sure that, our candidates can see how our values are living within the organization.
Susybelle, first of all, there's been a change in this idea of projecting values to potential employees, current employees, et cetera. The term values, the term culture is a big, broad term. I want to pick up on something Seto had, and Seto said it in this conversation as well, which is the communication piece of it. It's one thing to sort of write it down on paper and talk about it at board meetings, but how do we actually communicate this so that everybody has buy-in on this front? What's been your experience there?
Yeah, so communications is across our organization and externally is a value of ours, and it definitely increases engagement around our mission. Our new CEO, who's been in place for 10 months, is very big on the communications piece. And we internally are doing on our intranet report outs of work that we're doing individually to all staff to help with engagement and get engagement across the organization. And our communications shop that does a wonderful job. They are communicating in all different means externally with all of our stakeholders and grass top organizations. And we have Facebook pages and Instagram and all sorts of ways of communicating across so that our mission is being, when people are getting excited about our mission.
And Julio, the communication works perfectly and effectively every single time, right? There's never any hiccups and everybody just goes with the flow. Where do you see, pitfalls in this? Where do organizations need the most help? What, either from your own experiences or where here can the communications piece be solidified in some instances?
I think in terms of communicating those values and the impact that the organization is having, I would say is a tool that we used quite a bit at my former employers was infographics, right? Coming out with really clear, big, bold numbers, because folks are just not going to read a really long pamphlet or document or a website, but images as well as big, bold numbers and statements, those really stand out. So try to really get to the what are those key elements? What are those key, where are you driving the most impact? What are the key things about your values, if you will, right? That really stand out. So try to really synthesize it to just a handful of them and really push on those. And it's a little bit like a politician talking, right? Like where you're talking, like you're delivering the point maybe 3, 4, 5 times in order for people to actually sort of grasp it. But I think infographics are really helpful. And those infographics can only be good for like handing it out at an event, or perhaps even posting on your website, posting on our social media communications, when you're meeting one-on-one with a prospective client or a donor or a candidate. Those are great tools to really synthesize and really get to those big points, the real impact that you're driving, and what can connect with those individuals.
Julio, I'm coming back to you in just a second. Susybelle, let me come back to you for just a second. We sometimes have to distinguish between internal. I'm going to use the term impact here. I know it's a big, broad term, but sometimes we have to differentiate the way that we are communicating impact internally to our internal stakeholders versus how we are communicating our impact externally. And it depends also on how altruistic or non-altruistic the organization wants to be. How do you all handle that in terms of your internal impact communications versus external impact communications? Is it the same? Is it different? How do you walk those paths?
No, it's a great question. We differentiate them. And as I said before, we're a learning organization. So we spend time on and spend probably 4 sessions a month to communicate the stories and the learning of things going on within the 80 counties. So for example, when in January, we had a lobbyist come in and talk about what's going on at the legislature. And then to add on to that, we would bring in what the policy folks within the organization are doing. So it's a way of sharing out what's happening, informing all of the staff, getting them engaged around how can you make a difference in this space? How might we leverage this information in other pieces of work, whether it's our investment in grants? And so we have themes around the work with external folks coming in to teach, and then internal folks reporting out on the work that they are doing. And so lobbying is one of those things that is an example, along with the legislative session and what impacts health.
Excellent. Seto, is it safe to say that highlighting small wins internally goes a really long way on the retention side of things. That sometimes the external stuff that the big stakeholders sometimes just don't get, but man, that can make a huge difference internally on the retention side, can it not?
Absolutely. And also sort of re-educating our staff on the value of the small wins. I think sometimes we get distracted by the end goal and fail to realize the small successes and lessons learned along the way. And it's also, now that, something I've been thinking about actually recently is how do we celebrate just incremental changes, especially following the pandemic, where I think, motivation is really key. And, sometimes, especially in our work, it takes a long time to see the fruits of our labor. We're trying to drive change at all levels of, the government, in our communities. It's a lot of engagement, a lot of mobilizing, a lot of bringing people along. And these aren't things that are going to materialize tomorrow. So how do we keep folks motivated? And it's really through these small wins. And right now it's sort of done informally, where we may, celebrate, a mention in an article that talks about our scientists collaborating with other scientists in other countries on a particular climate goal. It could be our contribution to a bill being passed that's focused on climate. And it could be small, those are two examples of ways that we're trying to celebrate the small wins, but also thinking about how we structure that a little more to help attract new candidates when we're talking about being specific, and also retaining our staff as well, given the type of work that we're doing in our mission.
Great.
Yeah.
Julio, let me ask you this. We're going to pull back a little bit here and talk about challenges, but what are, in your mind, the top 3 challenges that you see for nonprofits, foundations, social impact organizations when it comes to recruiting and retaining? So recruiting and then retaining top talent, and how do we overcome them? Just small question for you.
Just wrap up on something that Seto just said on the celebrating small successes. I want to give a shout out to a colleague of ours named Jonna. She is celebrating on Teams or Slack channel and so on regularly every time. Like, they got this thing called Winning Wednesdays and so on. So shout out to Jonna for keeping us honest here and for celebrating our successes.
Yeah.
In terms of the challenges, honestly, I think of 2 clear ones, right? It's just increased cost of living. And then that's also driving, of course, the increase in levels of compensation because of the continued tight labor market, right? And so sometimes it's challenging for whether it's a nonprofit or a foundation, association, to stay competitive, or even a small business to stay competitive with some of the larger private sector employers. Now, the good thing is, not to say that you can ignore, for instance, the compensation piece of it and the benefit piece of it, because you cannot, right? You still have to be somewhat competitive there. But the good news is that there's been research clearly stating, this was done by the Morning Consult, and McKinsey ran studies last year. They surveyed a number of American employees, and they basically said that the pandemic had a significant impact on how they want to reflect on their purpose in life. That was 2/3 of the respondents stated that. 2/3 of employees wanted to reassess basically their purpose in life. And that was driving half of them to actually reconsider their work. Now, they call that not the great resignation, but the great reconsideration.
Mm-hmm.
The great reconsideration of what you do in life, what you do at work, how to use your talents to benefit society, the environment, the planet, etc. So this is a key opportunity for these social impact organizations, whether it's a nonprofit, foundation, association, etc., of how do you really message that, right? What is your impact, right? Now, all these organizations still need professionals, very talented individuals, very experienced individuals, whether it's lawyers, attorneys, finance experts, logistics experts, etc. But they want some purpose in their work, right? So what is it that you have? What is it that's unique about you What is it about your mission that really can connect with that individual? The other piece of it is, and we alluded that a little bit on the values and so on, what is your culture like, right? Are you a champion for inclusion? What are the unique benefits that you offer, whether it's just celebrations, right? Hybrid work environments, things of that nature, right? What is it that makes you different, right? And also give some examples of individuals that have not only stayed with the organization, but grown with the organization. Give specific examples so they can actually see themselves growing and really having an impact, not only in their professional careers, but also driving an impact for the organization. So I think those are some really great levers that these type of organizations can use to attract and retain talent.
Susybelle, the workplace cannot solve everybody's issues. I want to play golf 6 days a week, but I have to work for a living. And it's gotten more expensive to live in this world, but not every organization can give all of their employees a 12% increase. And oh yeah, by the way, what happens if COLA goes negative? What if inflation is counterbalanced? We're not asking employees to take less money now. So
Right.
What has this meant from your side in terms of the downward pressure on organizations to address all these things post-COVID? And on top of this cost of living increase that Julio rightfully points out. What are we going to do about that?
Right. So in our recruitment process, one of the things that we really tease out is, are folks really mission driven? Because we know, just like the market, things are going to go up and down at all times. But if you are bought into the mission, you're going to be able to ride those bumps the best you can. The organization is going to support folks in those moments the best we can with flexibility and the levers that we can control. But if you are bought into the mission, you can help ride those bumps. And that is definitely something that I look for in the interview process.
Seto, I see you nodding your head. Do you want to add anything on top of that? You're on mute. There you
Sure,
go.
sorry about that. Yeah, I really liked what you both said around the great reconsideration, as well as, the mission and vision of an organization being of topmost importance right now, following the wave of the Great Resignation, and we'll see what it looks like with the inflation or the looming recession, what the shift would be. But I don't think it's going to change that much. I think it will continue to be, the mission and vision of an organization will continue to be of topmost importance for candidates. And it's part of this great reconsideration that Julio just mentioned. So I was sort of nodding my head in agreement, because these are just some key trends that we're seeing in recruitment at all levels of the organization. It's more about culture. Mm-hmm.
So you're bearish on the next 6 months, on the recession that has yet to come, that everybody's been predicting for 2 years. And do you think this culture values piece is the number one thing as a recruiter that you're looking at for the next 6 months in terms of this recruitment landscape?
I think so. I think that there's an increase, just to kind of dive a little bit more into what mission and vision are, and some of the values that folks are looking for. And for us as well, that now that we've formally become a remote first organization. So we've retained our 4 offices, but we've allowed for flexibility in terms of location across the country. And I think it goes back to what folks feel is most important in their lives, which is work-life balance as well. And so there's a increased appreciation for what that looks like, not just clearly defining boundaries of work time, but what it means to be, what well-being looks like, what it means to have a healthy, culture centered around well-being, and defined expectations of what it means to be a good institutional citizen. So we just can no longer have this overarching blanket umbrella policy to say, hey, we value your work-life balance. We have to really be specific about what that looks like. We have to be specific about what it means to be in a remote hybrid organization. And this includes things about like being really clear about workspaces, meeting culture, technology, team norms, core hours of collaboration, and once again, being really flexible. So I think those are the things that we need in order to be able to attract and also retain individuals as, you know, we're all sort of walking through this journey together post-pandemic, post-racial reconciliation across the country. It's really about well-being, for lack of a better word. And well-being encapsulates a lot of the things that we've talked about, which is around mission and vision as well. It all cascades down from there.
Julio, is remote and hybrid here to stay?
Well, been reading about some clear examples of some larger employers who are reversing course there, right? I believe, however, that particularly in this space of the purpose and mission driven organizations, that this is one of the tools in their tool belt that is available as a way to stay competitive. And so I can't say that all are going to say that, hey, hybrid remote workforce is going to stay. I think less and less fully remote, but more and more hybrid is going to be the norm. And it's going to remain the norm, of course, for those employees that can actually do their work in a hybrid fashion. Yeah. I think it's here to stay for a great number of organizations, but it may not be the right fit for all. Right?
Susybelle, you all touch a lot of organizations in Texas. What are you seeing on this front? And then I'm going to kind of ask you a two-parter here, because I do want to get your feedback on this hybrid question. But can you tell, you mentioned this 36 hours that your organization commits to employee education and well-being. And I'd love it if you could give us a little more detail on that, on what that looks like, because what I'm trying to highlight here is what best practices or innovative approaches look like on the retention side.
Right. So back to the topic of the hybrid environment. We understand that if folks are expected to come into the office, then they want it to be meaningful. And so we were already a learning organization, but it helped us because we were more intentional about, okay, when you are in the office, we will be gathering. People naturally seek community, so they like being together. When we come together, there is, you know, this aspect of the learning and sharing and having the skills to practice presenting before you go to others. So there's always building up the skill sets within the organization. So all along the way, but the hybrid, the learning piece has really been good for the learning component of this. And you were asking for more examples. I'll go into a little bit about how we set it up. We try to do no more than 4 learning conversations per month, because we have to do the work too. It's right. Great that everybody's learning. We want people to present, learn, grow, but we need to do the work. And so we try not to bog people down with these pieces of time. So no more than 4 a month. We try to make the learnings and the innovation around whatever is happening at the time so that it's relevant. We want to make sure that we bring out around outside guests, and we go big of who can we bring in. We have found that, you know, you think, oh, I won't bother that person, they're a speaker, but there are a lot of folks that are willing to pop in for an hour, whether it's, you know, if they're local in Houston, which is where we are, or it's a Zoom call and coming into our space. So we tap into a lot of folks and send invites, and we just want people to feel like they're learning and growing at all times. And part of our recruitment, back to that piece of it, is we know that people need to be adaptable at this time. COVID taught us that. It's something that we look for in our recruitment, and we know that change is inevitable and you have to be adaptable. and we're constantly growing. And so we want people to continually learn and grow and bring in different lens to our pieces of work. And also part of our learning component is the equity piece too. We're equity is the center of the work that we do. And so we bring in equity into those spaces as well, and even further beyond these learning and brown bag sessions.
Great. That's actually my next question. And Seto, I'm going to ask you to start off on it. But before I do that, you know, there may be some people on this call and they're thinking, oh my gosh, this all sounds wonderful, but my organization doesn't have the type of budget in order to be able to do something like that many times a year. And I think, Susybelle, what's important about what you're highlighting, it's scalable. I have two sisters who live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they participate in a group every month of a group of professionals. And the only idea is that one person at every 1 hour meeting comes to talk about something where they get to learn about something new. You could come in and talk about ducks. You could come in and talk about orchids. But that's the part of it. And I think organizations can do something similar. Again, it doesn't have to be 36 hours a year. It can be able, whatever the number is that works right for your organization. So I think it's a really wonderful example, and it's something that can be done at a relatively low cost that you might, again, it might actually become a really important small win. Seto, and I'm going to ask all of the panelists this question. Seto, how are you all ensuring diversity? And you all call it JEDI, I know that. But how are you all ensuring justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in your talent acquisition practices? And how has a focus on JEDI impacted your hiring efforts?
Great question. So a few years ago, UCS did make a commitment to diversifying the organization, starting with the top leadership. And it led to the creation of my position, the Chief JEDI Officer role, who oversees our JEDI initiatives within the organization, and diversity within our program leadership and other executive roles as well. I partner closely with our Chief JEDI Officer, and that includes things like not just looking at metrics. Metrics are important, definitely, but also understanding, just taking a continuous learning approach to understand where we have and continue to fall short in our own diversity initiatives, and wanting to be sure that we're not taking a check the box approach, which we know doesn't work. It's harmful to the organization and to the individuals who are brought into these positions to meet diversity goals and things like that. So that also includes not just the check the box mentality, but assessing where within the organization BIPOC staff, for instance, thrive, and where they are less successful within the organization, and really working with our leadership to identify these areas of opportunities and for challenges. Not only do we want to attract good, diverse candidates, but we also want to ensure that we're hiring people, especially at the leadership level, whose values align with UCS's. So that they already have a personal commitment to JEDI and have had some experience, or at least are able to demonstrate their commitment, even if they don't have the direct experience. So we're very upfront with our candidates about our goals to become an anti-racist, inclusive, and equitable organization. And we test the mettle by gauging their experience and commitment within the interview process. We're also on a continuous mission, like I said before, to work with our hiring managers and leadership to ensure that their hiring pools are diverse, and looking at where we may need to slow down, because oftentimes there's a lot of urgency to replace a position and we lose track of our diversity goals within that. So really being intentional about slowing down, reevaluating our recruitment strategies to ensure that we've reached candidates from various demographics. So that's where we're sort of starting, is really sort of digging deep under the surface and really being intentional about how we approach this, looking at where we're falling short and making sure that we're putting tools in place and not taking a cookie cutter approach to this as well, but what makes sense for UCS.
Excellent. Thank you, Seto. And let me just make a quick announcement to our audience. We're going to go into questions in just a second. I've already got one, which is actually a real question that we had on here as well. So I'm glad it's been asked. But Julio, can you follow up on the Jedi question from what Seto was talking about?
Yeah, so we as a firm work with so many clients, right? We've completed over 1,000 executive searches from coast to coast.
Right.
And something that I think it's a point of pride for us is just we're very intentional in our recruitment, right? And it requires that level of intentionality to get results, right? And so proud to report basically that roughly 30% of all our candidates that we presented are people of color, if you will. 40% are actually the people who actually place are people of color, and over 60% are women, right? So those are great stats. Nonetheless, it's also what we do internally, right? So we came together as a firm, if you will, and we reaffirm our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? By coming up with a unifying statement. We actually had, rather than the leadership team coming up with a statement, we had a committee of employees who came up with a draft of it, and then there was a lot of back and forth, if you will, right, of dialogue, what the right statement would be. And this is a value that we've adopted as a firm. Not to say that we didn't have it, we sort of expanded it on it and reaffirm our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And but it takes working with our clients, if you will, right, to make sure that because so I think to Seto's point, some of them want to move really fast, right? But we don't want to sacrifice on our commitment to diversity and inclusion. And we're going to work with our clients. We're also going to be counsel our clients, right, in terms of in order to achieve those goals. We leverage our partnerships, if you will, that we've been able to build over the number of years, partnerships with a number of, whether it's minority or women or LGBTQ plus organizations, professional organizations that can help us access some of this talent that is needed and desired by our clients. So anyway, it's just it's the work that we do internally, but also the work and the commitment that we have to our clients and to our candidates that we're going to be very intentional here.
Great. Susybelle.
So as I said, equity is at the center of what we do. We have made changes in this space and had a commitment to this starting a good 4 or 5 years ago. And we started with consultants and then started thinking about our work and how can we be more equitable in how we invest in our grass tops organizations. And we soon realized that the investments needed to start internally. So we started doing our own work. And that over time, to make a long, I could talk about this for well over an hour, but at the end of the day, in terms of recruitment, we have blinded all of our candidates. So when they come in, we have a diverse committee of folks internally that we put out RFPs for new consultants, and we do it for consultants, vendors, and our candidates. And we put out an RFP, and then we have an administrative person internally do the blinding so that the folks on the diverse internal committee can then look at it, and then we do a scoring system. And then we have a grand reveal of who would that entity, consultant, vendor be or candidate, and then we would go from there on the interview process. But first, before you even do that, you have to make sure that you are spreading the RFP or the job description widely to diverse audiences. I mean, that's critical. Otherwise, blinding doesn't do much good. But we have done that, and it's been a fascinating process internally for all of our folks. And there have been a lot of aha moments of how we proceeded, but it's been a wonderful thing for us. And we, as we invest in grants and do work out in our communities, and equity is at our root, we want to make sure that we live that value internally in all things that we do.
Great.
And I want to take it one step further, because Julio and I had spoken about this before. When we are looking at organizations and vendors, we're not just looking for a DEI statement. We're actually looking at the individuals within the organizations and what work have they done in the equity space. Because anybody can put out a DEI statement, but we want to know, what are you doing as an individual for your personal growth, whether it's reading, whether it's going to seminars, whether you are in an equity circle, which is something we do at our organization as we break up into circles monthly and talk about hot topics in the DEI space. But we're looking for that personal growth, not just an entity statement.
Great. Thank you, Susybelle. Let me jump into some questions from our audience, and we've got some good ones here. The first one is from a wonderful guy who's a friend of mine and just a really terrific guy, Paul. Thank you for your question. We had a question for this similarly, so I'm glad you're asking it. How are your organizations establishing policies and best practices for the use of AI to accomplish the goals of impact you publicly strive for? Susybelle, can I put this one on you? I know you've just got returned from a technology conference. Can I start with you on this one?
Sure. So technology is part of my responsibility and umbrella. And we're fascinated by it. We're in the exploration mode, but we have been tapped to be a guinea pig, where we have an entity coming in and pulling data from our database in certain fields, not grantee information specifically, but we're doing an experiment where the information of our grantees is pulled and then it'll be synthesized in some way for AI. And we just kind of want to see what that's like. So we're at the beginning stages. There's a lot of curiosity around it. And if it ends up serving us well and how we tell the story of our grantees, it remains to be seen. We spent a lot of time at the end of the strategic plan analyzing data and where investments are, what that looks like. We have evaluation reports, but we want to see if the AI will pull out how we've synthesized the information. So it is top of mind.
Great. And Paul, I can tell you, we're experimenting with it, as are a lot of executive search firms, with some of it's offshore with RPOs, but there's even more micro approaches using AI, mostly on the efficiency side, to help us with research. I can tell you that it is a big conversation right now in the executive search world. So it's a great question, and I think there's going to be there are already scores of questions about this coming forward on this, but I think there's still, in a lot of organizations, a great deal of experimentation. Let me get to the next question. A question from the potential candidate side: any advice on how to navigate a transition from federal service to a nonprofit career? Julio, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, so I haven't worked in the federal government field, but I can tell you we work with a lot of folks who transition from the for-profit world to the nonprofit world. I would recommend a few things for you to consider, right? What organizations are you affiliated with right now? Are there opportunities for you to join a board of directors or to volunteer with a nonprofit organization that really speaks to you, right? So you can learn more about their culture. In addition to that, just remember, right? Nonprofits, foundations, they all still need very experienced, professional, driven leaders, right? And so the experience that you bring from the federal government could very well be a translatable skill to any of these organizations, right? And frankly, these worlds actually sort of collide oftentimes, right? Because governments work with nonprofits, nonprofits work with for-profit organizations. So again, I would encourage you to, one, look for ways to get involved with organizations, nonprofit organizations or foundations in your local market there, your local town, just to at least to gain an appreciation for what is the work of the organization, to really go beyond the statements on the website and really dive into what is that impact, what is the day-to-day, what is the culture of the organization. That's one. And then also join professional networking groups or attend professional networking meetings. They exist everywhere in every market, right? in pretty much every industry, right? And so it'll give you an opportunity to at least see all the different organizations that are in your market, in your community, and figure out which one is most speaks to you, if you will, right? And just a little bit of advertising here, like this is the work that we do at DRiWaterstone Human Capital. So reach out to us on LinkedIn or visit our website or reach out to Doug or I. We work with candidates every day, really, that want to make that transition, and we're happy to talk to you about that transition.
Yeah, don't ignore the associations too, because your sector expertise may become of real importance to particular associations. Let me get to the next question. How are you fostering broader organizational belonging, networking, and career growth in a remote/hybrid environment? Seto.
Sure, I'll try to keep it short because this is a favorite topic of mine, but I think onboarding is key from the outset, and which is why we've invested a lot on the people and culture team on a culture and engagement function that focuses mainly on that. So it's looking at things like transparent team norms, what are the keys to success within a team, within the organization at large? What are the competencies that are valued? Looking at things like, what does it mean to be an individual contributor, a manager, a leader, and making sure that we're making those distinctions and folks are clear about that. So a lot of the things that were more nuanced in a face-to-face environment, we're trying to spell it out and be more prescriptive about it, and making sure that we have a resource hub that specifies all the keys to being part of the UCS culture, and also as a way to grow within the culture as well. So competencies is a big one that we're focusing on, and we'll be focusing on into the next year or so, and looking for areas for cross-team collaboration to sort of help, helps folks engage more with folks that are outside of their departments. So looking for opportunities maybe to work on a project, understanding, project management, what's your role within a project. So I think that's the key, some of the things that we've taken for granted before we really need to put on paper and make sure that those expectations, we have a document that we call Expectations Made Explicit, that we share those out at the outset. So I think onboarding is really key for that, and looking at it differently from how we looked at it before COVID.
Seto, real quick, are you including some of these in your KPIs and your evaluation of managers, et cetera?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, okay. I figured so. Susybelle, you all too?
Well, we have an intensive managers training around these very things, and we have hot topics with our managers to ensure that these things are happening. And because we're an entity of 30, we can meet and talk regularly to ensure these things are happening. I know that's more difficult for larger organizations, but we're intentional about this very thing we're discussing.
Yeah. Let me get to one last question quickly. The question is, are people moving from the private sector into the nonprofit purpose sector? If so, are you finding specific retention challenges with those individuals? I'm going to say we see the interest, a great deal of people from the private sector wanting to go into the nonprofit social impact sector. The trouble that we see on the recruiting side is our clients oftentimes need a lot of convincing that the skill sets are a match, or better put, the pools are so competitive for the top talent that our clients typically default to the candidate who's coming with direct, immediate impact presence, and usually those folks are already in the space. I wonder though, Seto and Susybelle, do you have any exposure to this where you've seen potential candidates wanting to come in from the private sector? Have you had success there? What's been your impression of that, generally speaking?
Well, we love it because it brings in a different perspective. So there was an earlier question about this, and we don't want to just recruit folks that have been in foundations and nonprofits. We want new and refreshing ideas, and people that have been in other spaces bring some of the best ideas. So we welcome it.
Excellent. Seto?
Same here. I agree, especially in recent years. We've I would say a good 50% of the folks that we've hired recently come from, sectors that are not necessarily nonprofit. So we have a lot of folks coming from the university or the educational space. We recently hired a program director who's part of our senior leadership team who came from the government. And to your point, Doug, it's really about making the case for why skills are transferable. And we're able to demonstrate that. Yeah.
First of all, we love it when clients want to see a broad spectrum of candidates. And we love bringing candidates who are coming from outside just so that the client knows that there's a talent and a set of skills that based on our partnership with you, we hope is somebody that you'd consider. Obviously, we're in the disappointment business because we tell 9 out of 10 people they didn't get a job. Right. But it's the process itself is always one that, as we said at the beginning, all of this stuff starts at the very beginning. We're up against it on time. I want to thank everybody for participating today. I especially want to thank the panel. Again, Susybelle Gosslee, Seto Akinjiola, and Julio Suárez. I know any of these folks would welcome your questions or comments following up from today. We hope you participate in future conversations like this. And thank you all very, very much for joining us today. It's been great having you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.